Here's something else. Is the light of God shining in the American home and family today? Would that it were more. God invented the home and the institution of marriage. I find a very disturbing arrogance in that position of some of our highest courts who have basically taken it upon themselves to redefine the institution that God Himself invented. I find that not only troubling and distasteful, that's arrogant. How would you like it if you invented something and you got the patent on it, and this is something that came and originated from your own mental ability, you invented it, and someone else came along and said, yeah, but I tell you, that's not really the way that should go. Well, I think God knows how it should go. I think He knows what marriage should be, what the home should be. Our problem isn't that we don't have instruction from God. Our problem is we're rejecting the instruction that He's given us. He has laid it out. He said, here's what marriage is. He said, watch this. I'm going to show you what a marriage is. And then He created a man, and He joined to that man a woman taken out of his side. And He said, Adam said, this is now bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. And from that point on, God refers to her as Adam's wife. Marriage. Now that was long before the pseudo-intellectuals came along and decided we're going to change marriage. And it doesn't have to be a husband and wife. It can be just maybe a wife on her own, or maybe a mother on her own. It can be a father on his own, or maybe two daddies. And if we think about this for long, I'm sure we could come up with lots of other crazy combinations, all of which fly in the face of the God who invented marriage. God says this is what it is. Now, unlike the courts, God isn't going to cram it down anybody's throat. But I'm here to tell you, friends, if we don't start letting the light of God shine in the home, we're going to lose that. We're going to lose that which is so precious all the way back to the beginning of man. God's design calls for certain roles, certain standards, which make the institution work properly. In Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 4, the Bible says, let marriage be had in honor among all. You know that there are forces at work in this particular culture, this society, which would have people to believe that marriage is dishonorable. I have given you some of their quotes in other sermons. But God says, I want that to be honorable. Let marriage be had in honor among all, and let the bed be undefiled. For fornicators and adulterers, God will judge. Do you believe that? I would be afraid not to believe it. I'd be ashamed to preach a gospel that didn't include that particular passage, because that one is from God. That's part of His word, the Bible. You see, when man substitutes his wisdom for God's and then tries to reshape or redefine the home, the results are tragic. Although they may not show up until much later. The godly home emphasizes the importance, for example, of husbands and fathers. The father and husband who loves his wife and his children dearly. You're not getting much of that from the current culture, but that's the way the Bible reads. Here's a passage, Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25, beginning, Paul says, Husbands, love your wives. How much, Paul? Love your wives as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for it. How much should a husband love his wife? Paul answers that. Even as Christ also loved the church, gave himself up for it, that he might sanctify it, having cleansed it by the washing of water with the word, that he might present the church to himself, a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be holy and without blemish. Even so ought husbands also to love their own wives as their own bodies. He that loveth his own wife loveth himself. Or how about this wise statement from Solomon in Proverbs 10 and verse 1? He said, a wise son maketh a glad father, but a foolish son is the heaviness of his mother. There, in typical Hebrew poetry, puts a contrast that should show everybody the importance of godly homes. Children who respect their parents, honor them, and obey them. You know, there was a reason why, under the old law, showing disrespect to parents was so severely punishable. There was a reason for that. Cultures which lose the gravity of the home do not endure for long. We must get back to recognizing that God is the light of the world, even in the home.